Paige Bell had always been the kind of person people noticed without realizing why. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking, but there was something magnetic about her calm energy. The way she carried a quiet confidence that made others want to know what she was thinking. At 26, she had built a modest career as a freelance photographer in the sleepy lakeside town of Millhaven. Her photos, moody shots of abandoned places, cracked windows, rusted doors, and forgotten roads, had a haunting beauty that drew a small but loyal following online. People said she had an eye for the eerie. Paige said she had an eye for the truth. On the evening of October 12th, Millhaven was wrapped in a heavy fog that rolled in from the lake, muting the streetlights and swallowing the sound of cars. Paige had spent most of the day editing photos in her small apartment above a bakery on Alder Street. Around 6 in the evening, she packed her camera bag, pulled on her favorite grey jacket, and told her neighbor, Mrs. Harland, that she was heading out to shoot some photos before dark. She mentioned the Harrington paper mill, an abandoned factory on the edge of town that had been shut down for over 2 decades. The locals avoided it, saying it was dangerous and cursed. Paige laughed it off, saying the place had character. The old paper mill had fascinated her for years. Built in the 1940s, it had once been Millhaven's biggest employer until a fire in the early 2000s forced it to close. Since then, it had been left to decay, its windows shattered, its walls crawling with ivy, and its roof half collapsed. Paige had photographed the building from the outside many times, but never managed to explore the inside. That night, she planned to finally do it. By 8 o'clock, the rain began to fall steadily, pattering softly against the pavement. When Paige didn't return home by morning, her absence didn't immediately raise alarm. She often took spontaneous trips, sometimes camping overnight to capture the right lighting. But when a full 24 hours passed with no calls, no messages, and no social media updates, her best friend, Leah Corbin, started to worry. Leah tried calling her multiple times, but Paige's phone went straight to voicemail. By the next afternoon, she reported her missing. Police found Paige's car parked outside the Harrington paper mill 2 days later. It sat crookedly near the main gate. Mud splashed up the sides, as though she had arrived in a hurry. Her car keys were still in the ignition, and her camera bag was on the passenger seat. Inside the bag were extra lenses, spare batteries, and a flashlight, but the memory card slot on the camera was empty. The most disturbing detail was the driver's seat. It was pushed back farther than Paige would have set it, as if someone taller had been sitting there. Investigators searched the area surrounding the mill. The rain had turned the ground soft, and officers found several sets of footprints leading toward the building. One belonged to Paige, small, narrow, consistent with her hiking boots. But beside them was another set, much larger, clearly from a man's boot. The pattern was distinctive, a thick tread with a missing piece near the heel. The trail ended abruptly at the mill's main door, where the mud disappeared into the cracked concrete. Inside the mill, there were signs that someone had recently been there. A half-empty water bottle sat on a rusted table, and fresh footprints marked the dust-covered floor, but no sign of Paige. No struggle, no clothing, no blood, just silence. The air was heavy with the smell of mildew and oil, and the faint drip of water echoed through the corridors. Search teams combed the property for 3 days. Divers checked the lake nearby in case she had fallen or been dragged into the water. Nothing turned up. It was as though Paige Bell had vanished into thin air. Millhaven was small enough that word spread quickly. The story of the missing photographer made its way through every diner, gas station, and shop. Some said she had run away. Others whispered about someone waiting for her in the dark. The most chilling rumor came from a group of teenagers who claimed they saw a light flickering inside the mill the night after she disappeared. Just one beam, like a flashlight moving slowly from room to room. When police went back to check, the place was empty again. Paige's disappearance left a hollow ache in Millhaven. Her family put up missing posters, and Leah visited the mill every day, hoping for any clue. The only thing everyone could agree on was that Paige hadn't planned to leave. She had appointments scheduled, unfinished work, and plans to meet Leah that weekend. None of it made sense, and yet, in her apartment, everything was untouched. Her laptop open on the desk, a half-drunk cup of coffee on the counter, and a note pinned to her corkboard with a list of locations she wanted to photograph next. At the top of that list, written neatly in her handwriting, were 3 words: Harrington Paper Mill. Detective Mason Drexler had seen his share of disappearances, but something about Paige Bell's case unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. He'd been with the Millhaven Police Department for almost 15 years, a quiet, methodical man known for solving cases that others called impossible. Still, this one was different. There were no clear motives, no witnesses, and no body, just a talented young woman who seemed to have dissolved into the shadows of a decaying factory. The only clue that stood out was the empty slot where the memory card should have been in her camera. Someone had deliberately taken it. Paige's family was small, her parents living 2 hours away in Clearwater, both devastated but confused by what could have happened. Her best friend, Leah Corbin, was the first person Mason interviewed. Leah was nervous, pale, her eyes red from crying. She explained how close she and Paige had been, how they often explored abandoned places together before Leah grew too anxious to keep up. She mentioned that Paige had been restless in the days before she vanished, talking about a new photography project she said would change everything. When pressed for details, Leah admitted she didn't know what Paige meant, only that she seemed distracted and secretive. The next person of interest was Evan Rook, Paige's ex-boyfriend. He was a local musician who performed at small bars and lived only a few streets away from her. Their breakup 6 months earlier had been public and messy, full of accusations about trust and betrayal. Evan told the detective he hadn't spoken to Paige in weeks, though messages on her phone suggested otherwise. 3 days before her disappearance, she had received a text from him that read, "Can we meet? I need to explain." When Mason asked what he had wanted to explain, Evan said he'd hoped to apologize, but Paige never replied. His alibi for the night she went missing was shaky. He claimed to have been home writing music, but no one could confirm it. Then there was Nora Vale, Paige's landlord. A stern woman in her 50s, she owned several small properties around town and didn't have a reputation for kindness. Nora told police that Paige had fallen behind on rent by nearly a month and had avoided her calls. She described Paige as flighty, the type of person who lost track of time and didn't take responsibility seriously. But when Mason checked the records, Paige wasn't late. She had paid 2 days before she disappeared. Nora's irritation suddenly seemed misplaced, almost rehearsed. The investigation widened, and soon the police learned that the paper mill was occasionally used by urban explorers and vagrants. One name appeared repeatedly: Colt Merrin, a 34-year-old security guard who had worked for a private firm hired to patrol abandoned sites. Colt was known for his temper but had no criminal record. When interviewed, he said he often checked the mill but hadn't seen anyone there in weeks. He also denied knowing Paige. Mason noted his boots immediately, large, size 12, with thick treads that looked eerily similar to the print found near Paige's car. When the detective asked to see them up close, Colt hesitated before agreeing. The tread pattern matched, but the distinctive missing heel section did not. It was as if the print at the scene had come from an older, more worn pair of the same model. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Paige's belongings brought little progress. No fingerprints besides her own were found in the car, and no signs of forced entry appeared. The drained camera battery and missing memory card suggested that whoever had been with her wanted to hide something. Perhaps the last thing she photographed. Mason couldn't shake the image of her standing in that vast, echoing building, camera in hand, capturing something she wasn't supposed to see. 2 weeks after Paige's disappearance, the case seemed frozen. Then one afternoon, a plain brown envelope arrived at the Millhaven police station. There was no return address, no postage stamp, just Paige's name written in shaky handwriting across the front. Inside was a single SD memory card wrapped in tissue paper. When the forensic team loaded the files, the room fell silent. The card contained dozens of photos, all time-stamped the night Paige vanished. Most were consistent with her usual work. Wide shots of the mill's empty corridors, piles of broken machinery, streaks of light cutting through shattered windows. But as the sequence went on, the tone shifted. In one image, a blurred figure stood near the doorway of a hallway. In another, a hand was visible against the wall, just the edge of it, as though someone was hiding behind a corner. The final photo was black, taken in complete darkness. But the metadata confirmed the camera had been triggered. Mason knew this changed everything. Someone had been with Paige that night, someone who didn't want their face to be seen. And now, weeks later, they, or someone else, had sent the missing memory card directly to the police. It was either a warning, a confession, or a cruel game. But one thing was certain: Paige Bell hadn't simply vanished. Someone had made sure she would never come back. walls and graffiti-covered beams. Her voice, steady and calm, narrated what she saw. She commented on the texture of the walls, the way the light hit the broken glass, the eerie quiet that filled the building. Everything appeared normal until she reached the lower levels. The footage revealed a narrow staircase leading underground, a place few people even knew existed. The air grew foggy with dust, and Paige's breathing became audible. She whispered something about hearing movement, though nothing could be seen. Then, for a brief moment, the camera caught a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, a shape that looked human, partially obscured by a beam of light. Paige turned toward it, and the frame shook as if she stumbled. The figure vanished before she reached the spot. Her flashlight flickered twice and then steadied. From there, the footage became more erratic. The timestamps showed small jumps, seconds missing, as if the recording had been cut or corrupted. In one frame, a door appeared slightly ajar that had been closed in the previous shot. In another, a distant sound, a low metallic scraping, echoed through the space. The final clip was the most disturbing. It showed Paige's camera falling to the ground, landing sideways on the concrete. The light from her flashlight pointed upward, illuminating a pair of boots standing only a few feet away. Heavy breathing filled the audio track. Then a hand reached forward, covering the lens. The screen went black. Detective Mason Drexler replayed that last clip more than 20 times. He studied every pixel, every sound, every flicker. The boots were large, definitely belonging to a man, and covered in mud. The tread was distinctive. Thick ridges, square edges, and a missing patch near the right heel. It was the same pattern as the print found near Paige's car. He ordered another search of Colt Merrin's home and locker, convinced he had missed something. Colt maintained his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with Paige's disappearance. He provided his time logs, showing that he was assigned to another property the night she vanished. But when the security firm double-checked the records, they found something strange. The entry for that night had been altered. The timestamp of his check-in was overwritten, and the digital signature verifying his location was missing. Colt claimed it was a system error, though his nervous demeanor told a different story. He was arrested for questioning, and his boots were confiscated for forensic comparison. When tested, his footwear matched the brand and size of the ones in the footage, but not the wear pattern. His pair was relatively new, lacking the worn heel seen in the print at the scene. Mason realized that if Colt wasn't directly involved, someone had access to the same type of boots. Someone familiar with the security company's gear. The possibility opened a new direction. Whoever attacked Paige might have used a uniform or equipment to appear legitimate. Meanwhile, the investigation into Paige's personal life continued. Her phone records revealed late-night calls to an unlisted number. The owner was identified as a former mill worker named Byron Tan, who had been fired years ago for trespassing on company property. When located, Byron claimed Paige had contacted him after finding his name in a town archive. She had been researching the mill's history for a photography project about forgotten industries. Byron said he warned her not to go there after dark, insisting the building wasn't safe, but she laughed and said danger made better photos. As the evidence piled up, the town grew restless. News outlets picked up the story, calling it the Mill Haven Mystery. Reporters crowded outside the police station, and the abandoned paper mill became a local obsession. Teenagers snuck inside at night, live streaming from its crumbling hallways. Each claimed to feel something: cold spots, whispers, or flashes of light in the dark. For Mason, the attention only made his job harder. The truth was buried under rumor and fear. Late one evening, while reviewing the footage again, Mason noticed a detail he had missed before. In one of the earlier frames, behind Paige, a faint reflection appeared in a broken mirror. Part of a face, just enough to make out the edge of a scar near the jawline. It didn't match Colt Merrin. It didn't match anyone in Paige's known circle. The discovery reignited the case. If the image could be enhanced, it might reveal the real person who followed her that night. But just as the forensic team began their analysis, a new complication arose. Someone broke into the police evidence room. The only item missing was the original memory card. The lock had been forced, and no fingerprints were left behind. Whoever had taken it knew exactly what they were doing. The card, the last link to Paige's final moments, was gone again, and with it, the investigation that had finally begun to make sense unraveled back into uncertainty. 3 months passed before the case of Paige Bell showed any movement. The investigation had slowed to a crawl, and the residents of Millhaven began to treat her disappearance as an unsolved legend rather than an active search. The media attention faded, reporters left, and only Detective Mason Drexler remained unwilling to let the case turn cold. He continued to visit the Harrington paper mill every week, hoping that something, anything, might reveal itself. Each visit ended the same way: silence, dust, and emptiness, until one day, it didn't. It was early February when a hiker named Owen Lark stumbled upon something unusual while following a trail behind the mill. He had been exploring the wooded area, photographing icicles on tree branches, when he noticed a section of ivy covering what looked like a metal door. The door was rusted, sealed halfway by soil and roots, and hidden from plain view. Owen pried it open just enough to slip inside. The smell hit him immediately: stale air, rot, and something metallic. His flashlight flickered across the walls, revealing what looked like an old storage room, filled with broken machinery and piles of discarded papers. Then his light stopped on something in the corner. At first, he thought it was a mannequin. When he realized it wasn't, he stumbled out and called the police. Within the hour, the site was surrounded by yellow tape. Forensic teams descended, photographing every inch of the hidden chamber. In the far corner, half buried beneath debris, were the skeletal remains of Paige Bell. Her clothing matched what she had been wearing the night she disappeared, and beside her lay a broken tripod, the same brand she used for her photography. The medical examiner later confirmed she had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. The estimated time of death matched the night she vanished. For Mason Drexler, it was both a breakthrough and a tragedy, the confirmation he had been waiting for, and the proof that Paige hadn't simply run away, she had been murdered. The tripod became the most important piece of evidence. Forensics discovered a partial fingerprint along the metal hinge, preserved by a thin layer of grime. When the results came back, the name shocked everyone involved: Leah Corbin. Paige's best friend, the woman who had reported her missing, was now tied to the murder scene. Mason's first thought was disbelief. Leah had been emotional but cooperative from the beginning. Her grief had seemed genuine. He went to her apartment personally to bring her in for questioning. Leah was pale when she opened the door, her hands shaking as if she already knew what he was going to say. She didn't deny touching the tripod. Instead, she confessed that she had been at the paper mill the day after Paige disappeared. She said she had gone there out of desperation, hoping to find her friend. She claimed that she found the tripod lying on the floor near the main entrance and took it home, terrified that it might somehow incriminate her if people thought she had lured Paige there. When she realized the police were closing in, she had panicked and hidden it in her garage, where she said it stayed until she decided to move it again days later. But Mason suspected there was more to her story. During the interrogation, Leah revealed something that reframed the entire case. Paige, she said, had recently discovered something inside the mill, old documents locked in a metal box that she claimed proved corruption within the town council. According to Leah, Paige believed the papers showed that Millhaven's mayor, Ronan Kells, had covered up a worker's death in the 1990s, one that occurred during the mill's last years of operation. The company had paid off the victim's family in exchange for silence. Paige wanted to expose the truth, to publish it as a photo essay titled "The Ghosts of Harrington Mill." Leah had begged her to stop, afraid she was getting in over her head. Mason began digging into the claim. His search through town records revealed that Ronan Kells had, in fact, served as the town's legal advisor during the mill's closing. Several documents from that era were missing, replaced by blank files labeled as archival error. It was enough to open a quiet internal inquiry. As Mason's suspicions grew, strange things started to happen. His car was broken into one night, though nothing was stolen. A stack of case files disappeared from his desk and reappeared 2 days later in the evidence room. It felt like someone was trying to warn him or control the investigation. When Leah was released pending further investigation, she left town immediately, saying she couldn't bear to stay in Millhaven any longer. Mason watched her go, unsure whether she was escaping her own guilt or someone else's reach. What he didn't yet realize was that Leah's confession about the mayor was more than just a theory. It was the key that would soon uncover the real reason Paige Bell had been silenced, and the person who had gone to terrifying lengths to make sure her discovery never saw the light of day. Detective Mason Drexler spent the following weeks piecing together everything Leah Corbin had confessed. The mention of the mayor's name had changed everything. Ronan Kells was a powerful man, well-respected and deeply connected in Millhaven. He had served as mayor for nearly 15 years, known for his charitable events and smooth charm. But beneath that polished image, there were whispers, rumors about shady deals, missing town funds, and his involvement in the paper mill's mysterious closure decades earlier. Mason now believed Paige Bell had uncovered proof of those rumors and had died because of it. The challenge was linking the mayor directly to her death. With Leah's information, Mason began combing through archived files, town budgets, and records from the Harrington paper mill's final years. What he found was a trail of inconsistencies, payouts labeled as maintenance expenses, missing safety reports, and a gap in the employee roster for the month of the fatal mill accident. One name had been erased completely: Byron Tan, the same ex-worker Paige had contacted before her disappearance. When Mason re-interviewed him, Byron seemed terrified. He admitted that a man from the mayor's office had threatened him years ago to keep quiet about the accident, claiming it was a preventable machinery malfunction that killed a young worker. Byron's silence had been bought with hush money, and the paper trail led straight to Kells's assistant, Gareth Thorne. Thorne had worked for Kells for over a decade. He was quiet, diligent, and invisible, the kind of man who never drew attention. Mason reviewed his background and learned that before his city job, Thorne had worked briefly for a private security firm, the same one that employed Colt Merrin. Suddenly, the pieces began to connect. The boot print, the missing memory card, the altered patrol logs. It all pointed towards someone who had access to the firm's equipment and had the authority to manipulate records. Thorne fit that description perfectly. When police obtained a warrant to search Thorne's property, what they found shattered any remaining doubts. In his garage, hidden behind boxes of campaign materials, was a small red toolbox. Inside was Paige Bell's missing camera wrapped in plastic. The memory card was still inside, and when recovered, it revealed a sequence of photos that had never been released to the public. They were the same images she had taken on the night she vanished. Only now, the sequence was complete. The last set of pictures showed Paige deep inside the mill, capturing what looked like the corner of a metal box partially buried under rubble. The next frame showed a man's figure standing in the doorway, blurred but tall and wearing a jacket with the town emblem, the same one used by city maintenance staff. The next few photos were frantic, unfocused, suggesting that Paige had started running. The final image, taken seconds before the camera hit the ground, caught part of the man's face. It was Gareth Thorne. When confronted, Thorne broke almost immediately. He confessed that Paige had found the hidden box of documents and contacted him for verification, not realizing he was directly tied to the cover-up. She told him she was going public with the story. Thorne panicked, knowing that exposure would destroy not only his career but also the mayor's reputation, and by extension, the entire council that depended on him. He said he followed her to the paper mill that night, intending to scare her into leaving the story alone. When she refused, their confrontation turned violent. He hit her once, she fell, and her head struck the concrete. He insisted it hadn't been planned, that it was an accident. He said he had taken the memory card, hid the camera, and sealed the hidden door to ensure no one found her body. The mayor, he claimed, had known nothing until later, though Mason doubted that entirely. Thorne's confession triggered a media storm. The town of Millhaven turned on its leadership overnight. Reporters swarmed the courthouse as Thorne was charged with second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. Under pressure, Mayor Ronan Kells announced his resignation, citing health reasons, though leaked emails later revealed that he had been aware of the payout scheme all along. He was charged with corruption and tampering with public records. For Detective Drexler, the case ended in bittersweet relief. Paige Bell's body had been found, her killer exposed, and her story finally told. But there was no sense of victory in it. He attended her memorial, where her final photographs were displayed under soft lights in the town's small gallery. The exhibit was titled The Last Light, a name Leah Corbin had chosen. Among the photos were Paige's haunting images of the mill, beautiful and desolate, capturing the place that had become both her greatest discovery and her grave. After the service, Mason drove past the Harrington paper mill one last time. The building stood silent against the horizon, its windows hollow and dark. Yet as he slowed to look, he could have sworn he saw a faint flash from deep inside, a flicker of white light, brief and cold, like the reflection of a camera lens catching the glow of passing headlights. He knew it was impossible, but for a moment it felt like Paige was still there, still capturing truth in the dark, still refusing to be forgotten.